Hi, everyone. We have quite a few people on, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I hope you're all having a lovely afternoon. Really appreciate you all making the time. Spend some time with us this afternoon to hear more about Fairygodboss. We have a few slides. If you have questions, we'll do a quick Q&A at the end, but of course you can always reach out to me. Who am I? I am ROMY NEWMAN. I'm the co-founder of Fairygodboss, and I'm excited to be talking to you today. This is our Fairygodboss 101, and what we want to talk to you about is how the best companies are thinking about reaching more female job seekers and filling their pipelines with more qualified female candidates in 2020. So I'm going to start with a quick overview of what is Fairygodboss, then we'll talk about gender diversity, why gender diversity recruiting is important. Why is it important to have a strategy to attract more female talent? We'll talk a little bit about behavior that we've identified that differs between female and male job seekers. And we'll talk about how you can reach female job seekers, and we'll share some case studies. That's me in a very awkward looking photo. I'm the co-founder of Fairygodboss. My co-founder and I actually both used to be executives at a large publishing company. And one day, my co-founder got really unexpectedly fired in a big management shakeup. And no one knew it, but she was 2 months pregnant. So there's no discrimination, but it meant that she had to go find a job. And she did what a lot of female job seekers did. She wanted to be able to research as much as she could about potential employers online before even submitting an application. But what she was trying to research was why do women have success here? Is this a company that's really going to support me? Is this a company that's going to pay me fairly? Is this a company where I will be treated decently? And she's trying to research all this information, but all of the career resources online were more generic. They weren't addressing these questions that she had specifically about what's it like to be a woman at this company. So my co-founder Georgine, is a true product entrepreneur because she said, this is a white space and I'm going to be the one to fill it. And that is how Fairygodboss came to be. Even since our launch, there have been a lot of changes in the marketplace and in the kind of the macro landscape that make the need for a female-oriented career site much more pronounced. And for example, this is just actually from about a week ago, the Wall Street Journal wrote this article about how women have overtaken men as the majority of US workers. So that's a fundamental sea change. And we think about a lot of our offices and cultures and practices, and they were built for a workforce that was majority male. So this is a real fundamental sea change. And I think there's a lot of ways in which we need to think about adapting or refining our systems and processes to facilitate having more women in the workforce. And just to kind of give an example that is puts a fine point on it, I think I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I'm going to actually use my Q&A function and tell you this statistic and see if any of you knows why. It's a sad statistic. Women are 73% more likely to die in a car accident. Does anyone know why? There's a Q&A function on the bottom. Can any of you think about or suggest maybe why women are 73% more likely to die in a car accident? Anyone bold enough to raise your hand and suggest an answer? Morgan, you suggested they're multitasking. They may be, but actually the reason is, let's see if anybody else has a suggestion. The reason is that crash test dummies model male bodies, not female bodies. And so car manufacturers need to change the way that they're thinking about who's going to be driving the cars in order to make them safer. And so when we think about a lot of our processes or approach to the workplace, to think about how are we changing our thinking and changing our practices to be more friendly to women. And there's real positive, excuse me, there's real positive benefit in doing so. Companies that have greater gender diversity have been shown to have better business outcomes, be more innovative, and have better decision making. And recent research suggests that gender diversity is a top priority for many, many companies. And what's interesting is that 78% of companies are saying we're actually actively trying to hire more women. So what does that mean? It means that there are more women in the workplace, but the competition for that pool of female talent has never been greater. Companies are working really hard to differentiate themselves as top employers for women. So what I'd love for you to think about is think about your employer brand. Does it resonate with women? Do women think, wow, that is a great place for women to work? That is a place that women really flourish. And if not, what could we do to help make it be so, have it be more recognized as a place that women want to work? And that's what I'll talk to you about today. So what Fairygodboss does for companies is we help many, many more women know about your employer brand and why they should consider working there. We provide them with narratives about why women have success and why women should want to work at your company. And then we convert them to job applicants at your company with the goal of up to a 50% increase in pipelines for key roles. So in short, what is Fairygodboss? We are the largest career community for women. We've got, in the last 12 months, over 7 million women came to our site to look for jobs. And it's interesting, there's 73 million women in the US work. So 1 in 10 today have used Fairygodboss, and we're excited. We're a young company, and we're excited to have that number grow and grow, so that almost all of the women who work in this country use Fairygodboss as a part of their job search. Women come to Fairygodboss for a variety of different reasons. They come because they're wondering, they are looking for career advice. And we have a team of the best editors, the best in class editors who know a lot about what women read and what women want to know, and they're creating original content for them every day. They come to ask anonymous questions to our community. And I think one of the key differentiators of our site is that our participants can participate anonymously and ask those hard to ask questions and get answers from our community. We have anonymous company reviews for women by women. Women can leave a review with 15 structured questions about what it's like to be a woman at their company. And I think our reviews product differs from others on the market because we encourage our reviewers to be positive, or I should say to be constructive, and to also kind of answer this set of questions about what's it like to be a woman working here, what experience do women have. So the information we're collecting in our job reviews is really different than what else is out there. And then lastly, we have a really extensive job board with over 150,000 jobs from companies that have raised their hand and said it's important for us to hire more women at this company. So we've got about 7 million women who've used the site in the last 12 months. Here's some information about their demographics. They actually are not majority entry level. So the vast majority of our users, the average age is about 30, and their level is around director, 62% are director and manager, and only 24% are at that entry level. And that's a really important point, which I'll come back to. But what we find is that there's real attrition after the entry level among female employees. And so that's a real value point that we can help companies bring women in at the experience levels. Our audience is located all across the US. It's very evenly divided. It's really driven by population trends. And when we look at the kind of skills or the kind of roles that our users are applying to, the highest proportion is in technology, followed by sales, marketing, finance, and consulting. And another really exciting thing about our audience that's really important to us as a company is that our audience is incredibly diverse. So we under-index in Caucasian and over-index in all other minorities. We also have strong presence in other underrepresented populations, whether it's other abled, whether it's LGBT. And the way that we do that is we partner with a series of over 150 different organizations, small organizations that help us grow our audience in different areas. So for example, we work with um, an a Latinx product called the Latinista. We work with an LGBT product called the NGLCC. And the way that we work with these companies is that we promote Fairygodboss to these audiences to get them engaged with our product. And I'm also extremely proud of the caliber of companies and the diversity of companies that we work with to help recruit. So we work with some of the biggest and most impressive employers in this country. We work with Apple and Microsoft and Bank of America and IBM and T-Mobile and Wayfair and Home Depot and Walmart. A lot of the companies that we work with are sort of best in class for women, and a lot of the companies that we work for are just starting on their diversity journey and are trying to establish themselves as kind of more known or more considered for female employers or for female employees. So why should you invest in a separate platform to drive gender diversity recruiting? Why is gender diversity recruiting critical? Well, first of all, this is my favorite slide in the world. This is a slide that comes from Morgan Stanley research, and it showed Morgan Stanley took a variety of different companies and tracked their stock performance based on how gender diverse the management teams were. And what they found was that companies with more gender diversity had higher stock returns over time. And why I love this slide is I'm sure I don't have to tell you that the reason that we are all here is to drive investor returns. Companies exist on earth to drive shareholder value. And so if you're wondering why it might be worthwhile to invest in driving more gender diversity, it's because it drives shareholder value. Another thing that we find pretty frequently, and this is data that comes from McKinsey. So what McKinsey found was that at the entry levels, populations of men versus women are relatively even. But at every rung of the ladder through promotion, workforces become significantly more male dominant. And one of the things we've seen among our clients is that the reason for this is not that women leave or attrite more than men. They attrite at the same pace. But what happens is that at the experienced level, new recruits tend to be significantly more skewed toward being male. So one of the ways that we hope Fairygodboss can help companies be more successful, and we also help that we can support the growth of gender diversity throughout the US workforce, is to help bring in more experienced level female candidates, which, as you saw earlier, is our strong suit as a platform. And the reason that that's ultimately important is that the progress toward gender diversity is really slow. This was kind of a bummer of an article that came out almost a year ago. Fortune found that more people in 2018 named Jeffrey became CEOs than women, period. So we're eager to help support that pipeline so that we can end up having more women in management positions. And then, as you could see, that would help drive stock performance. The other thing that we've found, and this data comes from Accenture, is that when you position a woman in a management role, it actually helps you build and strengthen the diversity of the organization throughout. So what Accenture found was that there are 3 times more women on the fast track in organizations with 1 senior leader than in organizations that are entirely male. So as I mentioned, one of the other things we've observed is that women behave differently as job seekers. Women consider jobs and look at different kinds of information than men do in the job search. Women are also not as aggressive or assertive in their job search as men. And then lastly, they're are industries or departments or companies that historically have not been viewed as a destination for women. An example of that actually is in the trucking industry, where historically, as you can imagine, most drivers were male. But what's happening is the trucking companies are reinventing themselves to be able to reach out to and attract many more female drivers because there's so many more women in the workforce. So, as you all know, I don't have to tell you that job seekers are more empowered and more informed than they've ever been. A recent study showed that 67% of job seekers have already made a decision about whether they'd accept a job before they interview. So all the information that job seekers can gather online in advance of an interview or an application is more important than ever. Your online footprint, what you're communicating, what job seekers can discover about you has never been more important. But what we find is that the way that women approach that research phase is very different from the way that men do. When men are researching, they're essentially just trying to uncover one single data point. What will I get paid? Women, on the other hand, want to know, how will I be treated? Are there role models? Are there women like me at this company who have had success? Is this a company that genuinely values gender diversity? And I always pause here to say, I think it's really important to point out, it's not that women don't care about what we get paid. Of course we do. But the reality is that women as job seekers and employees have more uncertainty about the kind of experience they might have. Women may have had a bad experience somewhere. So it's much more important for them to level set these sort of core necessities before they can then ask, okay, now I know I'll be treated fairly. Now I'd like to know how I'll be paid. And then the other interesting thing that our proprietary research uncovered was that men and women find jobs often in the same kinds of places, like job boards or through referrals. But in our research, women were significantly less likely to have successfully found a job on LinkedIn. And that was surprising to us because we know that men and women use LinkedIn at equal rates. So we probed, why would women be less successful on LinkedIn? And what we believe it comes down to is that women are not as assertive or aggressive about promoting themselves. Study after study shows that women in general are not as good at bragging about their achievements. They don't use as active verbs in their messaging. And so as a result, recruiters become less likely to reach out to them. And as you can see in our research recruiters women were only half as likely to have been contacted directly by a recruiter as males. And so, I think it's important to point out about this slide. It's not to say don't use LinkedIn. They're a great tool. I use them. But I think if you have an objective in place to increase the volume of women in your candidate pipelines, you have to supplement. You have to incorporate a tool that will help you bring in more female candidates specifically. And you have to think about how you're communicating. So this was a really interesting article from about a month ago where Goldman Sachs did an audit of their job descriptions, and they removed the word aggressive from all of them. And they saw an enormous increase in the volume of female candidates that they were receiving as a result of this one small change. So you can think about, there are words that in your communication are really important to helping attract more female talent, and then there are words to avoid. And so what Fairygodboss wants to do is help package up your employer brand and use the right words and the right images and the right ideas to help many more women become aware of your employer brand and consider you as a top employer for women. And the way that we do that boils down to this metaphor here, which is, if you consider this picture, two pictures of bath and shower gel. Really, there's not very much different about the bath and shower gel inside these two bottles, but it's packaged really differently to appeal to women than it is to men. And we want to help you think about how you're packaging your employer value proposition to attract more women. So some of the things we think you should consider as you're communicating the value of your employer brand is, who are the female role models in your organization? Who are the leaders who are emblematic of the kinds of positive experiences that a woman can have in your workplace? What kind of benefits do you have in place that are important to female employees? How do you train and develop? We know that women are less confident at the point of entering a job. If they know that they'll be developed and trained, they're more likely to want to apply. And then lastly, what kind of communities or infrastructure do you have to support female employees from a daily, day-to-day, something like an employer resource group? So when we work with companies, we help draw out the narratives. We help draw out the proof points and the stories that we know will resonate with potential female job seekers, and we help to broadcast them for you. So here are some examples of how we've done that for companies. This first one was for American Airlines. This lovely woman is an executive there. And we profiled her as our Fairygodboss of the Week to showcase her experience, why she loves working at American Airlines, and how she rose through the ranks to have success there. We're also very committed to using storytelling and narrative to pull in more female job seekers. And one of the key ways that we do this is identify role models or prototypes of the kind of talent you're trying to bring in. So for example, we work with General Motors, who had a priority to try to bring in more veterans. So here's an article we wrote about an Army vet who actually relocated to Detroit to work for General Motors. And she's from Austin, Texas. And she said the only thing she missed about Austin was the tacos, because she loved her new job so much. Or you look at Fidelity, and we helped them with stories about how working mothers successfully flourished in their careers, and how their career helped improve their life at home as well. We also worked with Salesforce to help them attract more women in technology, and brought to life kind of the engineering journey of these technologists. So a couple quick case studies, and I want to leave time for questions. So we worked with 3M, large manufacturer with really high brand recognition in their home market of Minneapolis. But they wanted more women in more markets to consider them a top employer of women, and also recognize that as a company, they'd sort of undergone a transition or transformation from kind of old-fashioned corporate to a much more progressive environment. And so we created a content campaign for them to help bring to life some of the employees that broke the mold in terms of what the company believed people had come to expect of their employees. So here's a working mom strategy for tackling her busy days at work on the left. On the right was a woman explaining how the company helped her reintegrate following her maternity leave. And in the middle, this was actually the highest performing article by far. This was the story of a person who transitioned from a male to a female while working at 3M, and talking about how the company supported her throughout the transition. The results of the campaign resulted in 1,600 conversions to apply on the 3M site. And the team that we worked with there was extremely excited about the way that we were able to sort of reinvent their employer brand through these narratives, through these storytelling. And then we worked with a company called Agilent Technology, who was really focused on attracting more women in their technology roles. To support them, we engaged them in a virtual career fair. And so that helped drive 1,500 applications. The buyer there was really excited and understood that in order to change the dynamics of her candidate pipeline, she really needed to invest in a platform that focused entirely on female candidates. And as a result, she saw several additional hires in the technology department, in data science, in marketing, and was extremely pleased with the results. So that's the kind of helps to get you a feeling for how we work with companies. Before I take questions, which is the next thing I want to do, I want to let you know that we have a great white paper that we can share as follow-up that shares some strategies about how different companies can think about advancing and supporting gender diversity initiatives in 2020. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. It's ROMY, ROMY.NEWMAN@fairygodboss.com. And I'd love to connect with you. Thank you very much for spending time with me this afternoon.